This is The Discourse with Dr. Ken.
Good afternoon once more. This is a very bright Sunday. But yesterday, or was it 2 days ago, it rained cat and dog in Lagos. We are hoping that we'll get some respite this Salah weekend. By the way, happy Salah to all our Muslim brothers and sisters. We celebrate with you. And once I leave the studio, I'm heading straight to my friend who is waiting with the ram meat. No matter how expensive it has become, we will still share out of it. So this is The Discourse with Dr. Ken. And today's topic is Nigerian democracy 25 years after. By the way, today we should have been discussing artificial intelligence and what it does to businesses, or what we should expect, the connection and the future of businesses and artificial intelligence. But we looked at it again and said, hey, it's a democracy week. We just celebrated 25 years of democracy. Maybe we should discuss democracy 25 years after. And then next week we take artificial intelligence and businesses with John Orakwe. So today is going to be 25 years of democracy, and I have today a guest. I had to pull him in all the way. In fact, he was on his way again to University of Nigeria in Sokawa. I said, hey, Dr. Mbamalu, can you do us that favor? And as usual, he did us the favor. He's in the studio with me, Dr. MARCEL MBAMALU. Dr. MARCEL, how are you today?
I'm fine. It's good to be here, Dr. Ken.
Great. So today we are discussing the Democracy Day 25 years after. And as usual, what I normally would do is to read out a very short profile of my guests. And the profile today, by the way, you can reach us on 090921722973. And I take that again, 090921722973. So Dr. MARCEL MBAMALU is a communication scholar, journalist, and entrepreneur. He holds a PhD in mass communication from the University of Nigeria in Soka, and he is the Chief Executive Officer, News Tide Publications, the publishers of Prime Business Africa. Dr. MARCEL MBAMALU was news editor at the Guardian newspaper and has garnered multidisciplinary experience in governance, public relations, and media research. Dr. MBAMALU won the Jefferson Fellowship and was part of a global media team that covered the 2020 United States presidential election. He is a well-traveled public speaker and a strong advocate of democracy. Welcome again, Dr. MBAMALU.
Thank you very much.
How are you today? 25 years of democracy. How do you feel?
How do I feel?
Yes.
Interesting. It's a mixed feeling. One is a celebration that we've come a long way, 25 years. It's not a joke. Nigeria has come a long way, 25 years. When its democracy was rejuvenated, because when we talk about democracy, it was started somehow and then truncated at some point. And then, of course, and today, in 1999, we came back to democracy, a transition to democracy that saw us, have this dispensation that we have today. It's been a mixed bag for Nigeria. And if you look at, for me, I would say that just 25 years of democracy has been, a story of progress and contradictions.
Okay, so we'll leave it there, story of progress and contradiction. And I'm happy you reminded me that it's beyond 25 years. Yes, we had stages of it that were truncated before we got to this straight 25 years, the last we've heard of it. But there's a man I follow, Mr. Azu Ishepene, a fantastic writer. Let me read to you some excerpts of what he wrote last week. And I read this over and over again. I said, today I'm going to read this to our public. He said, it's been 31 years since the seismic event triggered by the June 12, 1993 election nearly brought Nigeria to its knees. The presidential candidate of Social Democratic Party, SDP, MK Abiola, was on the cusp of a resounding victory when the military general Ibrahim Babangida interrupted and later annulled the election of June 12. The action sparked nationwide protests that ultimately consumed Babangida's government and his successor, General Sani Abacha. That set the stage for a transition that over Abiola's dead body produced Nigeria's luckiest former military leader, Olusegun Obasanjo, as civilian president in 1999. Every May and later June, like we see, since then, Nigeria has marked its successful transition to democratic rule, the most extended 25 years of unbroken civilian administration in its 64 years history. So I asked Dr. MBAMALU, how far have we gone? And the lingering question is, how democratic have we become since all this time?
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Ken, for that question. I think, as I said earlier, democracy in itself, if I look at the very origin, the root word, democracy in itself, it's about the Greek word we call it demos, which talks about the people, and you talk about kratos, which talks about the power to rule. So by implication, democracy in itself is the power to rule given by the people.
Given by the people,
for the sake of the people.
Okay.
How far have we gone? We came close to that, and I'm very glad that my good friend Azui Shekwene talked about June 12 dilemma that got to a point that it became actually a milestones that we refer to today. We at that point, shortly before then, I think what made June 12 a success was because we talked about the people. We allowed the people to participate in such a manner that they felt that this is our own project. Look at the option A4 that gave rise to what we had. I mean, who was the chairman of the Electoral Commission then?
Professor
Humphrey Nwosu. The option A4 actually came very close to what should be what Nigerians, because again, if we're talking about democracy, we talk about how you relate it with the people. How does it affect the people? How does it work for the people? So you talk about different variants, but the most important must be by the people, for the people. So, but right now, the A4 option that was brought about by Humphrey Nwosu's Electoral Commission, allowed the people to participate at the grassroots level. First of all, it had to do with the direct participation of the people. It had to do with representative democracy that people had to participate in. And then people believed in the credibility of the process, and it came up with what people believe was close to a free and fair election. By the way, you can't talk about democracy without talking about elections. Election is actually the major plank of democracy, of democratic process. Because if you're talking about power to rule, selection or election of people who will rule must be done by the people. And once it is done by the people, whatever action those elected or selected, if you like, take, will be seen to have emanated from the people themselves. So how far we have gone from June 12 to now is again what I said earlier.
Mixed bag, huh?
Is a mixed bag. It's a success. It's a mixed bag of success and contradictions. Then let me talk about the milestones that we have seen ever since we talked about June 12. Some of the milestones that we had, for example, we had a transition after that June 12 dilemma and the rest. We had a transition from military, of course, to civilian, to democratic rule in 1999 that saw President Obasanjo emerge as president, in 1999. Then another plank of that, another milestone in our experience from that since then would be what I call the constitutional reforms that we saw. We had, of course, several attempts or several efforts to rework the 1999 Constitution itself. That's an action. Whether it's successful or it should have been done better in a different manner is a different kettle of fish. Then the third is the economic growth. Of course, we saw some economic growth in our democratic process, and that's also what we call the dividend of democracy, economic growth. I'm not talking about the contradictions yet, but we saw some economic growth that made Nigeria the biggest African economy at some point, with even the GDP of $250 billion at some point. So that gives you that impression that, of course, democracy had some, as a mixed bag for Nigeria, had some good in it. Then you have another milestone, technological advancements. We had some technological advancements like, of course, you saw in the area of telecommunications, for example, in the area of finance. You saw the reforms in the banking sector that saw banks from over 100 banks to becoming 25 and then becoming more powerful in terms of being able to take up more or bigger ticket transactions and all of those. Whether that has been sustained up to now is a different discussion. Now, the last is increased political participation. Since then, from that option A4 to now, we've seen some increased political participation.
And
awareness. Which, of course, is another major plank of democracy, enlightenment of the people who will participate in that process. So, of course, even in the last election, the 2023 election, you could see the kind of youth involvement and everything that tells you that that enlightenment has come there. It's coming a long way, has had the impact on it. So these are the milestones. So how far? So far, so good. But we still have a very, very long way to go.
Okay, talking about long way to go. By the way, listeners, you can reach us on 09092172973, 09092172973. And our discussion for today is democracy, Nigerian democracy 25 years after, and I have Dr. MARCEL MBAMALU. Now, and I need to ask you these questions because there were martyrs of June 12, and there were people who made huge sacrifices. So if the martyrs of June 12 could witness the nation's current state, would they have made the same sacrifices? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I would say, without any out of doubt, I would say perhaps yes.
Okay.
They would have, because even today we still have battles of democracy. People are still, it might not be in the same perspective, you talk about it, but people die today. Those who die in NSAS protest, those who died in NSAS protest, they are matters of democracy.
Okay.
They were asking for good governance. They were asking for dividend of democracy. They were asking for things to be done right. And then they lost their lives in Lagos. Yeah. So I think there are still battles. So I think that those who believe in democracy and who believe in fighting for democracy, if they were in this position, they will do the same thing they did then. Yeah, but if you look at the challenges that we have today, I think that what we have, our democracy has suffered a whole lot of setbacks. And in terms of understanding of truly what should be done, you could see that, or you can see that. Those, for example, like I was discussing with someone the other day, and the argument was, is there, how many generations have we lost in this democratic process? How many generations have we lost? Who would have been enlightened, who would have been participants in the democracy, but lost out because we've had a way of recycling our leadership, our leaders. We've had a way of hijacking the process, thereby not being able to allow our youths to participate effectively the way they should participate. I mentioned, for example, sorry about mentioning them, some leaders we had in the 70s today are still relevant. That shows you is a decay. It shows you there is a problem. If today we have to have a discussion on how to move Nigeria forward and how to do things, and we're still looking back to those, for example, who fought the Nigerian Civil War, those who were presidents then, those who were leaders then, those who were very relevant. And I will mention
then
names.
It's not new Nigeria we're talking about.
Of course. I will mention names here, for example. I was in primary school when President Obasanjo, for example, I love him. I love him up to today. He's still very relevant because he has something to offer. When I was in primary school, Obasanjo was president.
Okay.
Today, I'm almost a grandfather.
Yeah.
Obasanjo is still relevant in the political
in the scheme of things.
In the scheme of things, if you look at that, if the leaders of the 1970s are not relevant today, their children are relevant. So how would you describe that politics, that democracy? So it shows you that somehow we've got it wrong somewhere. But then I must say this: it's important to say that our democracy, for example, when you talk about democracy, the Western style democracy, the liberal democracy of the West, there have been this school of thought that says, okay, fine, yes, we can stumble, we can fall and rise. It's a special form of democracy because Africa has its own challenges. So you can't apply American democracy, for example, or the Greek form of democracy to Nigeria.
Yes, we'll come to that because at some point I will ask, maybe should there be a third option? Should we begin to reconsider the real meaning and the relevance of the type of democracy we practice? But the question I need to ask in the immediate is, would some of the beneficiaries of this struggle who are currently in government sometimes not question the validity of the struggle? What do you think?
I want to tell you something about this question that you asked right now, there, Ken. I watched I think it's radio discussion, but they had a way of, they shared it online, and I was listening to that. And someone was saying, that if, I think it's in our character, it's in the character, sometimes it's a challenge that brings out the you in you, who you truly are. Sometimes we don't discover ourselves. If you are a thief, for example, as the man was saying, if you are a thief and you are parading yourself as a pastor or as an imam, for example, it's only you can your attitude, your character, your propensity to steal can only be discovered when you are exposed or exposed to something to be stolen. Okay, so if you squeeze a car, the speaker said, if you squeeze the car, you're not going to get milk.
Okay.
If you press it, you're not going to get the milk. It's only going to produce the content of it. So it's only when there's the pressure, when you mount pressure on someone that is. So if you see people who are making sacrifices or who are in the struggle for democracy to strive, and then they get opportunity in government and they do exactly the same thing they were fighting against, it means that Abidisho, they were not manifesting their true self. They were only pretenders. They were only not Democrats, but they were just pretending to be Democrats. So I think that we have had true Democrats, people like, for example, I'm not talking about, maybe not in government, not in politics, but you've seen people who showed themselves truly as great Nigerians, refusing to be polluted, refusing to be compromised. People like Gani Fawemi, for example, maybe not in politics, you see, had opportunities. People like Chinua Achebe, for example, who had opportunities to be, for example, he was given some awards and he refused because he felt that the governance structure and the architecture and the style of governance at that point was not democratic enough. So I think that it's the character in you that determines who you are. And then when you have the opportunity to show who you are, then we know who you truly are.
Okay, fantastic. Like I said, a couple of messages on the screen. Malaki from Ota is saying in capital letter, there is no democracy in Nigeria. I can say, going from the questions that have been posted there, there's a lot of anger and despondency in the system. And that takes me to the next question. Democracy is more than campaign promises, Dr. Mbamalu. It is more than periodic elections and much more than the absence of military rule. This one we have that has brought Nigeria and the system under severe strain. Is it still democracy in the real context of it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I will tell you, like I said, democracy in itself is a representative government, truly representative government, and it must work with these prerequisites. If you ask me, in the first place, it must be people-centered. There must be good governance. There must be institutions, strong institutions to support democracy. When you lack these three aspects, and when you talk about institutions, strong institutions, you're talking about judiciary, you're talking about all the things, all the institutions that make governance work, that make democracy work. How independent, for example, are the institutions that we have? For example, the judiciary, how independent is the legislature, actually? How people-centered are government policies? So when you look at this, you see that why people are angry with the system today, the kind of democracy that we practice today, is because our democracy has been non-inclusive, overly non-inclusive, and I will come to that. I know I mentioned earlier that there are progress and contradictions, and the contradictions weigh heavily, very heavily against the progress made. So, and why I mentioned earlier about our politicians, recycling of politicians that have made it very difficult for us to have truly representative government, So, non-inclusive governance, leading to impunity, of course, and the dictatorial tendency. We have the dictatorial tendencies that we've seen over the last couple of years, and how to navigate this, to correct this, becomes an issue. Another issue we have that, of course, warrants concern is the tendency to be majoritarian, for example, and maximalist. For example, maximalist tendencies that we have. You have an opportunity, you have politicians get to the corridors of power, and it becomes like winner takes all. And then people are abandoned. The dividends of democracy, they don't get it. of course, there's also what we call the mismanagement of diversity. Our diversity, for example, the ethnicity, the kind of nepotism that we see in government and all of those things. These are the red flags that we see in our democracy today. Then you have the monetized politics that we've seen over time. You know, even in our last elections, you could see what happened. You know, especially with the idea of vote buying and the rest. So these are the things. So the will of the people are no longer represented. So how truly, for example, would you say that those who represent the people at every layer of government, you know, are truly representatives of the people? Look at, for example, if you check, I think, I don't know what I'm allowed to mention, but if you could check it out, you know, where we talked about 70% of the local governments, 70 or 60, between 60 to 70% of local governments in Nigeria are not governed by elected representatives. You know, how could you?
And that's the most important level of government.
Exactly.
You know,
that touches the people. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, so why would people not be angry?
Yeah. So and going and just to tell you how disenchanted people are, there, you know, there's an, you know, by the way, before I go to these questions again, Jonathan Power is one of Europe's most knowledgeable writers, and I follow him a lot. And he said this week that democracy is on the run. Actually, he said that there is qualitative and quantitative decline of democracy in several countries, including Nigeria. He mentioned Nigeria. He blamed the lack of vigorous policy implementation and good public administration. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Can we elaborate on that? So, for him, it's not so much about democracy, even though he said democracy in itself is on the run. But he said the major problem is very poor lack of vigorous implementation and good public administration.
Yes. You know, I told you earlier that the democracy, the very major plank of democracy itself is elections. If you get your elections right, electing the true representative of the people, then you will get governance right. Because one thing about elections is this: when an elected official knows that he was elected by the people, he will obey, he will listen to the people. He will do what will please the people. But if he knows that he could get re-elected even without the people, then he can do anything.
So he's not accountable.
He's not accountable.
No, democracy is about accountability.
So that's the reason why you have what you have today. Because people are not elected properly the way they should be elected. The institutions are not strong enough to ensure there is transparency enough to ensure that those who get to the corridors of power are those who the people wish to get there.
So, yes, Dr. Mal, that presents the predicament, really. In fact, there's another question. I need to take it. He says, we don't need anybody, including foreigners, to tell us about our situation. The daily lives of most Nigerians today, whether at home, school, work, or in the market, tell the story unedited. Folks are beginning to ask, first in whispers and now louder and angrier tones, what is the point of democracy that does not put food on the table? That's a question from John in Ikorodu.
Yes, and that's the point. We're talking about the contradictions. We have democracy, or what looks like democracy in Nigeria today, because people are seen to be elected, you know, or deemed to have been elected, you know, into office, and that's why we say we have democracy, you know. But you see, what we have a situation where we have economic growth, we bandy numbers, statistics, figures of economic growth, then versus poverty, inequality across board. You know, I don't think today we have the middle class in Nigeria anymore. I don't know. Tell me who is the middle class. I can't place it.
So it's either you are rich or you're poor. Which is a very dangerous sense.
Of course, is either you're rich or you're poor. And for you to be rich, you must not do
the right things.
You know, I'm not generalizing. There may be a few outliers here and there, but in the main, for you to be rich, you must hustle. And hustle in Nigeria, you know what it means. It means stepping on the toes of others to get there. So there are whole lots of contradictions in the economic growth that we have had with our democracy and all of those. So you have people who are hungry. You said you're making, and I've told someone, I said, government is not in the business of making money. In fact, if you have a country where government claims to be so rich, richer than the citizens, the private sector should be made to be vibrant enough, robust enough, to be rich enough to create employment, because government cannot employ they can only employ as many. They cannot employ as many as the private sector could employ. So I am asking, why was the basis for us to say government, whether it's through taxation or whatever, is amassing a whole lot of revenue. Whereas the private sector is crying, is drying up.
It's under crush, yeah.
It's under, of course.
There's knee on their neck, yeah.
Exactly. So right now, what I would suggest is for us to have a more liberal fiscal policy that would allow the private sector to thrive. If we have private sector thriving, then there will be job creation, there will be jobs for the youth, there will be jobs for everyone, and then the spendable income will be there.
So going by what I'm seeing on the screen, there's a big temptation for people to begin to ask themselves again whether all the struggle has been worth it. Going by other examples we've seen around the world. Take China, for example. It's not a democracy, but it runs a system that has lifted millions out of poverty and has created the largest middle class, because you just mentioned the middle class. It has created the largest middle class in the world. Do Nigeria need a special system of democracy? Made in Nigeria democracy?
Yes, my answer to that is
so what would that be?
Of course. Yes, we have. Democracy we talk about didn't start. Even America has its own version of democracy. We are not saying, the most important thing is that a democracy that gets people transparently elected to office. That's the basis. Once you have elections and the people who are elected are truly the representatives of the people, then other forms of other aspects of the democracy could be tinkered with to suit our socio-cultural norms and idiosyncrasies. So I think APG, the Africa Progress Group, I think led by Obasanjo, about 6 months ago, had a meeting, and I think one of the things they talked about was that there must be basically that nobody would throw away democracy, but there is need to Africanize our own democracy, to find a kind of...
Because going by our culture and our norms and even how we live, even coming from our villages and different tribes, we have a way of... even before the advent of democracy, I'm talking of Western democracy, we have a way of choosing our leaders, and it worked. And people respected.
And everybody accepted.
Everybody accepted, and they respected this. And these leaders actually delivered the wishes of the people. And there's a mechanism of taking them out when they go astray.
Yes.
So that is African democracy. So could we have built on that?
Yes. So instead of taking them out, who takes them out? The people.
Yes.
That's the word. So people-centered. A democracy that will work for Africa must be people-centered.
Okay.
That's the point. So whichever way it's done, it may not just be coming and queue. Before option A4 I mentioned earlier, we're having a different kind of elections until we brought it out, and it worked.
Okay.
That's a kind of aligning your democracy to suit your social cultural norms.
Yes.
So I think that everyone understands that. When you talk about democracy, the Athens form of democracy, the Greek form of democracy that was practiced, the origin itself, was the one that people just come up in a village square, come and everybody will now elect who will rule them. And it kept evolving into representative democracy, where you have people electing people to go and represent them, take decision on their behalf. But then every decision was taken for the Greek form of democracy it came from. Everyone will come to take decision on everything. Come together, they want to make a policy, they come to the village square, everybody come and vote. But it got to a stage where it became representative that you now have to elect someone who goes and take every decision on your behalf. So that tells you that there's also the possibility of localizing your own democracy, but making sure it does not lose that particular basic that talks about transparent selection of those, whether it's election or selection of someone who will rule you, who will take decisions on your behalf. So I think that I agree. Your question very clear. Yes, Africa needs its own form of democracy, but not without transparent representation. Okay? Not without transparent elections. Not without good governance. Not without strong institutions. If you don't have strong institutions, it still would work. So I think that the basic thing we'd consider is good governance, strong institutions, and then transparent representation or selection of those who represent the people. So people-centeredness of our democracy cannot be compromised for anything for our African. Our Africanness was also people-centered. You know, if you look at our culture, look at what we do, everything is about the people, the interest of the people, how to take care of the people, how to meet their basic needs.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's great. In fact, going by what I'm seeing on the screen, plethora of questions. A lot of them point to the fact that people are generally unhappy about the outcome 25 years after. You know, there's a lot of anger here. But I'll select the ones that represent Sunday, because Sunday, you are not supposed to come to Sunday with anger, isn't it? However, there's a lot of doubt. In fact, one of them is saying,
it's democratic to let people be heard too.
Yes, it is. But I can see there's impatience, and you know what? Impatience with democracy is also not the answer. That is my position. You know, yes, we may be distraught, we may be very angry about the whole situation, but my position is that impatience with democracy is not the answer. However, as they say, reason flees the head when hunger enters the stomach. So do you think hunger is entering the stomach now in the context of Nigeria? And how is that reflecting?
Dr. Ken, are you not hungry?
I am.
I'm hungry.
Oh, yes.
I'm hungry.
Yes.
And you see, if you say you're not if you don't I'm not justifying any kind of action or violence, you know, but if you look at, if sometimes take your car, drive through town, and just look and see how despondent.
Yeah. You know, this, we're Griffith Street, and this is off Awolowo Road. I just drove past the Catholic Church.
Yes.
I saw at least 1,000 people chasing after crumbs.
I'm telling you,
Catholic Church.
It's not a
I had
joke.
those people just now, you know, less than an hour ago. I saw people chasing.
Are hungry.
Yeah.
And a hungry man is an angry man.
Okay.
So, I said I'm hungry. It might be relative, actually, when you say I'm hungry, but everyone is hungry. Perhaps unless you're in government. It's only government officials that are not hungry. I know, I say that with every sense of responsibility, because we're talking about minimum wage, for example. Nobody's talking about minimum wage for those who hold political power. Yeah.
So the minimum wage is for some people. Yeah, it's not for everybody.
Look at the examples we're getting from Kenya. Kenya right now is almost becoming like the
poster boy. Yeah,
for Africa.
For Africa, yeah.
And it's unfortunate, you know. Where's Kenya? So just because the leader has chosen to lead by example, to say, no, I'm going to tighten my own belt. Before I'll ask you to tighten your belt, I'm going to tighten my own belt. Or every other person working with me is going to tighten his own belt. So you start from there. Let me tell you, it's just a decision. At the inauguration on May 29th, a statement sent the market running haywire. Just a statement. Subsidy is gone. Send the market running haywire. So just a statement, a disposition by those in power could change things for good, for the positive. All you need to do is just make that statement and take that decision and act. If people see that you're acting, things will change. It will even affect prices and so many other things, the markets and the rest. And that will be that all our legislators, those lawmakers and all of them, why must they earn as much as they do? Why we cannot pay 100,000 to our workers, for example? So that's the basic question. Everything will become hypocritical if you don't take that action. You don't lead by example. They don't want you to talk. They've heard so many talks. We've been talking since May 29th, 1999. 25 years after, we are still talking. We are still holding conferences. We are still having dialogue. We are still talking. Why don't we act now? People are hungry. They are angry.
So if I hear you clearly, unlike most of my listeners who have sent very angry questions, but if I hear you clearly, the question is not with democracy. I mean, the problem is not with democracy, but the problem is with performance.
Exactly. I said that the major plank of democracy is good governance. Okay. You elect people because you are looking for good governance. And then you must have a mechanism, a process of removing them when you notice that you are wrong in thinking that they will give you good governance. Whereby you lack, in a situation whereby you lack the capacity to change bad leaders. Whereby someone who gets to power must remain in power for the next 8 years because he has the levers of power. Then there's no democracy. I'm not saying that you make mistakes in democracy. Yes, you can make mistakes in democracy, but you must have the power to correct your mistakes. What we have had over the years in Nigeria, we have not had a sitting president who lost election. So, do we have democracy?
Yeah, but Jonathan lost election. He was a sitting president.
Yes, except in that. Yes, sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
Yes.
But we know the circumstances. We know what how it happened and the threats and what happened. And all of those. He lost because he chose to. And today he's being celebrated. And I think Jonathan is being celebrated not because he governed so well. He may have done a few things right and all of those, but he's being celebrated because he had the capacity, he had the mind to hand over power to the opposition. That's why today you can see he's being celebrated across Africa.
A symbol of
democracy, good governance and democracy. Yeah. Not because yes, of course, he turned the economy around. He did things in terms of our GDP picked up and the rest, but he may not have become the best leader Nigeria ever had. But for that singular act of allowing the transparent process in selecting our leaders, he's being celebrated today. So I am looking at the situation. I'm asking that, why is it possible? I should be answering the question, not asking anyway. But I'm saying Nigerians are not happy that it would appear that all the levers of power, all the institutions that support power in Nigeria are compromised, seemingly so. So much so that they are not able to say, no, we don't want this, and they will get what they want. The moment you have the freedom to say, I don't want this, and you have it, and you get heard, by the powers that be, then you are having democracy, around the corner.
Yeah, that's an interesting decision. I take a question from Kewelansky. In fact, it's a very long one, but I think fundamentally what he's saying is, how fundamental is a constitution to a democracy?
That's a very good question. But constitution, that's democracy. You can't really operate. Of course, whether constitution is very central to democracy because whether it's written or unwritten. Even in those days, you said you had a Greek whatever, they had a set of norms, a set of values governing them, which you must not flout. So constitution is very critical, and I think the person asking that question is looking at the direction at the fact that our constitution is not being followed. It's not sacrosanct, so to speak.
Yes, you got it right, because yes. I deliberately asked one part of the question. The second part of the question he asks is,
yes.
I ask this because it surprises me to see and know that Nigeria accepted to run a democracy on a constitution drafted and imposed on us by the military.
Yes. You see, yes, there have been calls for review of the constitution. Some people are even calling for outright scrap of the constitution, for a new constitution. They're just asking for a new constitution, and all because they believe that the constitution was not crafted by Nigerians. The people did not come together, as I said earlier, to say, okay, we give ourselves this constitution and all of this. And you could look at that. If you look at the constitution as it were, it doesn't really represent what we want.
So what Nigerians want is constitution that is given to us by Nigerians.
Of course, I don't begrudge that. I think you give it to them. The request to have a brand new constitution, it's not far-fetched. That request is not far-fetched. It's something that should actually be done if we need to start afresh. Today, look at what is happening. Is the constitution working when people are saying, let's go back to regional government? Some are saying, let's decentralize, let the center have less power, let the states have more powers, so on the exclusive list should be reviewed and all of those. It shows that something is wrong. If you have, Nigeria says it's a federation, but the constitution itself is a unitary constitution. We have a constitution that's unitary, whereas we said this is the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Federal Republic. That's a federation. So if we really want to practice true federation, or a true federal system of government, then we should be ready to review our constitution. But I don't think that it will be very easy to say, okay, throw away the constitution, let's just start afresh. We'll have something. We'll review it to the extent that we can use it to get a new constitution, okay? And then we'll take it from there. But I think that our constitution, one is that someone said if you follow the constitution as it is, we'll get good governance. And I agree. If you follow it, however faulty it is right now, if you followed it the way it should be, maybe our situation wouldn't be as bad as it is right now. But it's bad because even the very faulty constitution that we have is not being implemented to the letter. And those who are supposed to follow it are doing something else.
Yeah. So if the desire of majority of Nigerians is to get a constitution that has been imputed by Nigerians themselves, especially, I'm talking of democratic Nigeria, not the military. So why are we going back to a national anthem that was not created and written by Nigerians?
Nigerian, that's the point. That's the point. It's just the same question he's asking. That, of course, if we're going back to the old, let's even see, let's watch and see what is unfolding. If you look at what is happening, even from the body language of those who hold the powers and all of those, I think there's a gradual realization that things are wrong. Ab initio. You know, if a esteemed president could go back to say, our anthem is a very symbol of
that is very fundamental.
Yes, very, very fundamental. So it gives me, however good or bad it is, the decision to go back to...
It came from a sober reflection, yes.
Came from a sober reflection. So I think it's a sign that, it's an acceptance, acquiescence to the fact that, something is wrong. Even the very...
It's a 1 minute moment, for
exactly.
Yeah,
so that's my point there. I think that we are getting somewhere, but it needs to be fast right now.
It needs to be fast. Talking right about now. Being fast, So we're in general agreement, Dr. Mbamalu, that we will not trade democracy for autocracy.
No.
Forget about the poster boy China or the pseudo-democratized cousin Rwanda, which we have very close in Africa. But Nigeria is far from promise 25 years after.
No,
we're in general agreement, isn't it?
We have had challenges. So corruption, security, threats. We've had economic inequality. We have political instability. We have infrastructure deficits. So many things. So how would you say we're enjoying democracy? So for me, that is not our ideal form of democracy. Something needs to give way. So something needs to be done.
If I were in government and I was very close with that, this general consensus will give me worry. Because Nigeria, like we said, is far from promise 25 years after of democracy. So apart from government talking, and I'm happy you've mentioned that, you touched that, what exactly should government be doing now as a matter of urgency?
Too many things. Too many things. But it has to start from somewhere.
Okay.
Right now, people are hungry and people are angry. Government needs to begin to look at how... First thing I expect, because as I said earlier, government to do right now to make sure that this economy runs well is to ensure that cost of governance, start from there. That's the low-hanging fruit. Cost of governance goes down drastically. Cost of travels, allowances, lawmakers. What lawmakers take in a month could pay the entire civil servants the salaries. So if you cut down on that, people like Professor Patu, Tommy, the rest, there are so many of them. They've talked about having legislature that are not taking salaries, not taking
a part-time kind of structure.
Format.
Yeah, but these legislatures would make these laws that will bring about these changes.
Yeah.
And if they push and make these laws, the outcome of it will not be to their direct benefit. Do you therefore think a man would take those steps that will not benefit him?
Yes. Why? Those who, for example, I gave you an instance of someone who was given an award and he said no because he loved Nigeria. What it tells you, if they're now able to take that decision to actually take decisions that will make them cut down on cost of governance, it shows they don't love Nigeria. They are not representing us.
Okay.
Nigerians are asking that this is what we want. You are not going there to feed fat. You're going there to make the country better. So we are saying, cut down on what you earn. Cut down on what you earn to free resources. To take care of the minimum wage thing they were talking about, to take care of those who are hungry, to create jobs. And then if you say no, it means you don't like the country. So the low-hanging fruit I said earlier would be for those in government, lawmakers, those in the executive arm of government to cut down on their travels, cut down on their incomes, cut down on their allowances, cut down on everything, wardrobe allowances and what have you, kitchen allowances, room allowances, parlor allowances, all of those stuffs. Cut down on them and it will help.
Dr. MARCEL MBAMALU, yes, I've had the privilege of speaking to a couple of governors and then a couple of people in the National Assembly, senators, House of Rep. And a lot of them said to me, listen, Dr. Ken, do you know how much it costs to become a governor? And I kept quiet. And some of them threw figures at me, which is meant the budget they had to spend to become governor.
To bribe.
I don't know what it is, but they're saying it is a budget. So for them, it was an investment. Now you sit here and you say, you know what, cut down. Don't take this return on investment. How is a chicken and egg thing? What don't you think? And if they don't do, where are we driving to?
So there's something I'm talking about. Why would they spend so much to become governors, to become president, to become lawmakers? Why would they spend so much to become that? Because, as I said earlier, we don't have strong institutions to ensure there's transparency in the election process. If you have, as I said earlier, cut down the cost of governance, do a constitutional review, decentralize. The federal government is so powerful. Allow states to do much more than they are doing now. Let revenues be generated at the local levels, and then let taxes be paid to the federal government and whatever. I don't see the reason why the federal government will be earning 50-something, almost 60% of the revenue in the revenue sharing formula, and the states are getting 40. Is it 30-something or 40-something? Percent of whatever is shared. So it shows you that. And these federal governments, they are not going to be. The federal government is not going to go to the grassroots to do those things. They will only do things they consider very relevant. But those governors at the grassroots know what the people need. Rural areas and all of those things, they know what people need, and they will address them. So, first and foremost, people spend a lot because these stations are not there. They need to buy votes to win elections. Those the people choose are not going to get there if they don't have the money. So the people who get there are those who are able to raise the money, buy the votes, bribe the people, and get elected. I'm just saying there are people who are not elected properly. Of course, there are a few instances of transparency
but
in
that's,
election.
in your estimation, that's not the norm.
No, that's not the norm. That's an outlier. That's an outlier.
Exception.
Yes. The dominant situation we have is that people buy votes, people bribe their way. I've seen them even expose themselves, talk about this and whatever, help him get. Why do we have godfathers? If our elections are transparent,
to buy the form for everybody,
to buy forms for and things like that. So why do we have godfathers if we have a transparent election? We're going to have a transparent election. So the basis is because he spend that much, you don't expect him to go there and then govern well. He needs to recoup. He needs to get back what he spent. So strong institutions will allow us to. But we don't have those strong institutions,
so that's where the contradiction. So
I'm saying review the constitution.
They are not going to. So we leave it to prayers.
No.
What do you think?
Well, I hope you're not asking me to call for revolution.
No, I'm
not going to call for that.
Yes.
But I'm saying that if those who govern don't govern well, they're asking the people to take the laws into their hands. You get what I'm saying? So if you don't govern well, if you allow injustice to fester for so long, God forbid, you are calling, asking the people to take the laws into their hands. You cannot cry, beat a child, ask him not to cry.
Yes, but that's not what we want, because like I said emphatically,
we don't want that.
Not will throw democracy for autocracy. That's my position. I still think democracy is the better form of government, but performance must drive democracy.
Yes.
So I end, listeners, I end today's discourse by, I started with the quotes and the write-up of our good friend Azo.
Yes.
And I'd like to end with it, and what is he saying? He says there are broader issues like weak institutions, ineffective governors, election fraud, and a deep feeling among voters that elections are useless.
Yes.
These issues require the collective effort of citizens, leaders, and institutions to solve them, not through speeches, but more importantly, through performance. You agree with that? That's a good summary for today's topic.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbamalu, for coming today. We discussed today Nigeria democracy 25 years after. As is traditional on the discourse, do you have a proverb for us today?
I do.
Okay, what will be the proverb?
You would want me to give the proverb in English. It's an Igbo proverb. I'll give it in Igbo and then interpret it. The Igbo adage, Igbo proverb says, Nifa nebelo amuibi.
Okay.
Bono di no kolo.
Okay.
No karifisi nebu. What does it mean? That it says, literally speaking, that the reason why we worry about enlarged scrotum it's not because of the size, because it's not because of the size, but because of the position.
Where it is.
After all, it's not as big as what the head can carry. It's just the location, the position.
Yeah. So it's that grows in a very awkward position.
Yes.
So we shouldn't allow democracy to become
exactly.
We
can't be giant of Africa, God giant of Africa in name. We can't be. Every society has a problem, but in Nigeria, we shouldn't. There are things we would have outgrown by now. We should have outgrown by now. We
shouldn't be talking about this.
Exactly. So why we worry about these
issues?
Yes, we worry about the issues we raise because 25 years after, we shouldn't be worried about that. That's why it's an issue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Mbamalu. But you have to give us music for the week or your song.
All right.
For the week,
Well, I will sing it in English, actually. I have an Igbo music, but I will sing this one in English, which everybody knows. I should go ahead?
Well, if you give us I think the producer is waiting. If you just give us any music of your choice, the producer will play.
Okay.
And then
Which
become our music
Nigeria?
Okay.
Which way Nigeria? Which way to go? Which way to go? I love my fatherland. I want to know which way Nigeria is heading to. A hungry man is an angry man because he got many mouths to feed. Let's join our hands together and let them have to feed. Let's save Nigeria so Nigeria won't die. Which way Nigeria? Which way Nigeria? Which way to go? Which way to go? I love my fatherland. I want to know which way Nigeria is heading to. Many years after independence, we still find it hard to start. How long shall we be patient before we reach the promised land? Which way Nigeria is heading to.
Fantastic. What a way to close the topic for today, Nigeria democracy 25 years after. I'm sure our producer would have found that music and we take it on. If we haven't, of course, we would have enjoyed how
that's by Sonny Okosi.
It is. That's by Sonny Okosi, isn't it? Thank you very much for listening. Next week we'll take The Future of Businesses and Artificial Intelligence by John Orakwe. Thank you very much and have a fantastic Salah weekend ahead of you. Bye.
And that's it on The Discourse with Dr. Ken.